The myth I would bust is like the world is nothing without founders. We wouldn't have all these great things without someone who had the courage to, against all odds, start something. I find it sad when Kiwi companies that could go all the way sell themselves short. And I think at Goodnature we see that this thing could become really big and could make a real meaningful dent in a good way. My team, we share the same vision, and I think that's on tough days when you have fights or when you disagree or whatever, that part never wavers, and so we find our way back. Honestly, at the start, I didn't believe in the electric thing. Electric bikes are for my granddad. This is never going to be cool. Even when I was working at VanMoof and we were like revolutionizing electric mobility and we could get our own staff bike, I didn't take an e-bike for like 4 years because I was like, I don't need one. And then I got one and I was like, oh my God, it's just so much fun.
If you're looking back later in life, you're reading your own autobiography, right, and you're reading back through the VanMoof chapters, what are the things that you think you learned the most? Like, what are the things that define that time in your career?
I'm honestly still learning. So it went bankrupt like a couple of years after I left, and when we were back here and I was at Goodnature, so I'm still learning. The biggest thing I probably learned was around that focus thing, that you may want to do lots of things, but just do one thing. Like, as a company, do one thing better than anyone else in the world, and have the courage to double down and triple down on that.
Well, talk me through the difference between like selling a product globally, a hardware product globally from Amsterdam and then from Wellington. Is there any differences that you can see being on the other side of the world?
I mean, already what we're doing at VanMoof was pretty crazy in terms of, trying to disrupt this global industry, but
Welcome to the Startup Theatre podcast. This podcast is produced by Empire Films.
Hey everyone, I'm Troy Hammond.
I'm Serge Van Dam.
And you're back with us on Startup Theatre. And we have a really interesting episode for you today. We've been asked actually quite a few times now to, hey, let us hear some other interesting startup stories. Let us hear some stories that aren't super tech biased and super SaaS biased. And so we're listening to you and we're looking for guests now that are able to tell us some of these stories. And one that Serge and I both know that we think is going to be a great story when he comes in soon is a guy called David Shoemack. David is from VanMoof, which is the world's biggest bike company.
Well, it was for a period, yeah. So we'll hear a little bit about that story. But yeah, it was the Tesla of e-bikes, kind of created the category.
It was huge. Literally, they were everywhere, right? And there was like some famous, but like Owen Williams was there. There was like a lot of Kiwi connections over there. And so he's come back to New Zealand now, and he's now the CEO of Goodnature. Goodnature, which are the trapping company.
Resettable traps for invasive species like possums and rats and all that.
Department of Conservation's best friends. And also has a wife who's a really successful founder as well. So this is going to be a really super interesting episode, Serge. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, same here. And he's just a top-notch human. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, awesome. But we have been getting asked quite a few questions and about sort of certain topics in the industry and things. And so one thing that we've been getting asked a lot actually is, hey, like, what is this in the industry? And what is this? The new Startup Theatre guys seem to know what you're talking about. And so we thought we might try a new segment where we get you to explain some of these things that happen in the startups for us. And so how about if we give you a topic, an episode now, and you can break those down for us a little bit.
So you mean like an explainer video of some sort?
Yeah. What should we call it? Like something like behind the curtain. Behind the curtain. That's where I'm normally peeking out of. Yeah, awesome.
Why not?
Awesome. You and the robot. So let's get into that. I'm really excited to share some of these things. And I think the more that we can do to educate the industry on startups and some of the terminology and the taxonomy even of like what's happening in startups, the better we are and equipped we are to raise money to grow our businesses.
Yeah, and I think if we demystify some of these things as you're suggesting, then it just makes it more likely that people will jump into the world of startups.
Yeah, so Jono's going to do a really fun edit here and then we'll swap some seats and get into it.
Awesome.
Actually, Serge, before we go to that explainer video, before we change seats, so Jono, don't do the edit yet. There's something actually that's just come up, which is we've been given the chance to give away a $1,000 Prezi card to our audience, and they've said you can give it away however you like by one of our sponsors. And so I think we should give it to someone who has subscribed, whether it be, so you have to be subscribed to us on YouTube. You have to have liked one of the episodes on YouTube and following us on at least one of the sort of podcast platforms. And when we do our live 100th episode, I think we pull a name out of a hat and give $1,000 Prezi card to one of those listeners.
Seems fair, seems generous, seems like theatrical kind of thing to do.
Seems like something you do in theatre, right? And so we're currently talking to someone pretty special for our 100th episode, and so we're hoping to land. We've got 3 or 4 people that we're chatting to there. We're hoping to land one of these people, and so yeah, that'd be awesome if we can get this person to pull a name out of the hat. Because if you or I do it, it's going to be Finn or Molly, that gets $1,000 Prezi card. No, only kidding. We'll make sure that we really get the listener that's committed to us $1,000 so that they can buy us a gift, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. And so now let's swap seats and get into this Startup Explainer series.
Let's do it. We are opening up a new segment today called Behind the Curtain. It's really about learning some of the terms and what they mean. We have startup founders all the time asking us to explain some things. So it's sort of an explainer video, a new segment we're introducing today.
Yeah, what we're hoping to do is basically just give you some access to some of the things, some of the terminology, some of the things that are a little bit dark artsy, a little bit in startups. Like a lot of people always ask me, what the hell is a safe note? And so things like this, we're going to get Serge to talk with his wisdom about like the 10,000 startups that he's worked with over the years, and all the knowledge that he's soaked up, and try and just give back to you in terms of explaining some of these videos. And so we really want you to email us, get in contact with Serge or I or Adrian, and let us know if you've got a topic that you want us to go deep on. But yeah, we're excited to do this segment.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about ESOP or share options. So this is an option. Just think of the term option, meaning you have the opportunity in the future to decide whether you want something or not. And in this case, it relates to equity or shares in the company. And so share options are a way of incenting employees, typically, often leaders or early stage employees, with taking part or taking some of the share of the future value of the company. And it's an option because you don't have to take it. So if the startup fails, which many do, including the ones I get involved with, it really is of no cost to you. There's an opportunity cost, but no real financial cost. So a share option has a thing called a strike price and an exercise price. And so the strike price is the equivalent of what the shares you're paying today. So let's say today we own Startup Theatre. So the shares in Startup Theatre are worth $1, but Troy very kindly says to me, hey, Serge, do you want some options in the business? And so he's going to give me 100 shares per episode I do. Now, 100 shares at $1 isn't worth very much, but maybe one day someone will buy Startup Theatre for $10 a share. And so I will have the option to pay $1 for those shares and get the money that gets realized in the exit of Startup Theatre for $10. So I will make $9 or $9 per share I held in the company. I didn't hold the shares, I just held the option, but I get the net value that's realized. And of course, a Startup Theatre is a disaster, which is entirely possible, isn't it, Troy? Then that could be worth nothing, but I haven't really lost anything. I've just lost the opportunity of value. So that's how share options work, and there's obviously a lot of terms around that, and maybe Troy's got some of the common questions, and I'm happy to answer those. But that's the basic premise of an option. It's an option in the future to exercise those shares at a increased valuation from the way the price they were issued or struck at.
So I obviously give people job offers all the time, and I'd say 90% of that comes with ESOP, Employee Share Option Plan. And so I'm going to give you the same questions that I always get asked because I think they're the most topical. So do I get the shares straight away?
No, you don't. And so most of the time there's a cliff involved, which means that you don't get any of the options. And they're typically only options. They're not really shares. The reason they're not really shares is because for tax reasons primarily, which is, again, it's a complex area. So you've got to be working with the company for a period of time. And then there's typically a schedule, which is, you might get, I might get 100 options a year for the next 5 years.
So we normally hear like a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff.
Exactly.
And so what does that mean? So the 1 year means you don't get them for a year.
Yeah. So your first year is you don't get them until you've been there for a year. And the reason why is if you're a disruptive, painful employee like Jono, for example, at sort of month 2, he's out the door. We don't really want him on the cap table. We don't want him as a shareholder because he's a bit of a nuisance. So you typically have a 1-year cliff to make sure the person fits into the organization, is going to contribute. And then 4 years means we've committed to giving you this many shares per month or per year for the next 4 years. So you have confidence that over the next 4 years, you're going to earn enough shares to make the whole project worthwhile.
What happens if the company sells within 2 years and I'm in a 4-year vesting schedule?
Yeah, great question. So most share options for employees in New Zealand certainly have what's called accelerated options. So if there is a positive exit, you will have all of those exercised. So those 4 years worth will be available to you at that exit point. So you get accelerated options, which means you get all the value, which is typically a fair recognition because it means the company's doing better than you might have expected.
Mm. What's the average? Do you have an idea on what the average is like for a software engineer or for a marketing person, coming at a Series A? Like what's, because percentage-wise, I just don't know what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of benchmarks. New Zealand is relatively light compared to, say, the US market in terms of the quantum. In my view, early stage, I'd like to see key employees have about 10% of their salary at risk associated with the performance of the company. Some people don't like it, think that's too much. To me, that feels about right for most roles in an early stage company. Obviously, it means from an opportunity cost, if it all goes belly up, you gave away 10% of your salary for 4 years, say. Mm-hmm. But if things go great guns, then that 10%, could actually be a majority of the income.
Yeah. What happens if I leave the company, Serge?
If you leave the company, there's different provisions with share options. Sometimes you have to exercise them then, so you have to buy them at that dollar. Right, so I leave tomorrow a startup theatre. I got to hand you $100 or $100 per
episode.
Per episode, yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's the typical scenario. Sometimes you can give people an extended period of time to do so. Often for what's called good leavers, you typically have between 3 months and 5 years or something like that. So it's at the discretion of the company, but you typically agree this up front. And it can be changed on a case-by-case basis, but typically you got what's called good leaver and bad leaver provisions. If you're a good leaver, which means you haven't done anything toxic in the organization, just moving on to greener pastures, you'll typically have the chance to exercise those. You might get given a period, say a year, to buy them or to exercise them. If you're a bad leaver, quite a lot of the time, the company has the option either to cancel them or to claw them back, i.e. buy them back at $1, even though they might be worth more now. And typically bad leavers are it's a well understood term. It typically means you're not in dispute, all of that stuff. And it's typically something you want to make sure, if you do have options, that you clarify on your way out the door that you are a good leaver or not so.
Yeah. Awesome.
So there's no ambiguity.
This next question is sponsored by IRD. When do you have to pay tax on those shares?
Yeah, so again, there's some complex rules. They're actually being made a little bit simpler for the employee. And New Zealand does tax those gains as essentially remuneration if you're an employee. But most of the time, it's when you exercise them. So if you exercise them, you gain, at say $10 a share. I had 1,000 shares. That's $10,000 of gain. I will have to pay income tax on those $10,000. Disclaimer, see your accountant if you've got any additional questions.
And do I physically have to buy them, or can it be like minus the money that I would have been paid? Yeah,
it's typically netted. So it's typically like a paper transaction. We're going to assume you've paid us $1,000. We're going to pay you $10,000. The net of it is $9,000. We've taken the tax out. The rest of it is cash in your account.
Yeah, awesome. And last question, are shares worth it? Like ESOP, is it worth it?
Yeah, I think, look, there's different ways to look at it. One's economically, and that's just a probabilistic assessment. But my view is if you're joining a startup you don't believe in, why do it? Secondly, I think you start behaving like an owner. And I think that's the biggest benefit for employees as well as the company. Because when you are an employee and you start thinking as an owner, you're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't get a new pool table, a third pool table, and, that's company's money. And we could probably do better things with it. Or maybe we shouldn't employ this other person. It's a marginal role or whatever. So in the moment employees start thinking like owners of the business, they make better decisions. They become better professionals. And then the other side is it allows them with legitimacy to ask hard questions of the board and the CEO to say, why are you making that decision? That feels like a waste of money. That doesn't feel like a good strategy. And so you actually have rights, both legal rights as an option holder as well as moral rights to ask the hard questions. So I think it's always worth it. I'm definitely pro-choice here.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice as someone that's made some good money from ESOP. I'm definitely pro-choice, but then they can be considered a lottery ticket at the end of the day, right? And I think my advice is if you're going to be negotiating your package, make sure you negotiate your salary first that you're happy with, and that you're comfortable with at least, and then the shares is definitely something that if you're joining a startup and if you've got that appetite for risk, because you're joining a startup and you see potential and opportunity in someone, it can be a great opportunity.
And that's today's explainer on Behind the Curtain. on Startup Theatre.
Today's guest is brought to you by Vanta. Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for global frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, saving you time and money, helping you build customer trust. Over 8,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, Sharesies and Flossy all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. I actually had dinner with the whole Vanta team and I knew instantly that they would be the sponsor on the podcast. They just genuinely care about startups, and to make it go even one better, they've actually decided that my audience gets a special offer of $1,000 USD off from Vanta. All you have to do is go to vanta.com/startup theatre and enjoy your $1,000 USD off now. Well, awesome, Dave. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, mate.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's a real cool thing to get you on. I think you've got some really cool stories. You obviously worked at the famous, the world's best or biggest bike company in the world, VanMoof, which is a pretty cool experience. We had a few Kiwi connections with VanMoof. Like I remember OW.
Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
I hired Owen.
Yeah. I followed him on Twitter for a long time, and I remember him over there, and then obviously yourself.
He was amazing.
I mean, it was like felt that company's like messaging, marketing, success felt really huge here. And then obviously when they declared bankruptcy, that was hard as well. And I guess like from your perspective, though, like talk me through that moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was gut wrenching. So I was at VanMoof. We definitely weren't the biggest bike company in the world. And so that's what's interesting about it. There's bigger companies that make thousands of models, et cetera, and sell in every country on earth. Like we sort of we wanted to be the best at one single thing, which was moving around cities, and commuting. And within that, we sort of said we believe the electric bicycle is a great way of opening up access to cities, and we want to make that cool. Yeah, so when I joined, I was the 19th employee back in 2016 or something.
What made you join? Like, what did you see then?
Yeah, before that I'd been at Heineken. So I've been working at the Heineken HQ in Amsterdam 5 years in a pretty cool global role, traveling the world.
It's a great office too there. It's
great office right beside the old brewery.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was waking up, I think we were about to have our first kid, and I was waking up every day with a literal pain in my chest. And the pain wasn't, I hate my life. The pain was I can see how I could stay in this company for 30 years. I'd just been offered a job to move to Mexico with the whole family. It would have been very cushy and whatever. And I could see what would happen if I did that. I could see the people who did that. And 30 years later, they've been to 10 different countries. They've done 3 years in each. They've been in compounds the whole time. They've progressed up the chain and
institutionalized almost.
Yeah, and it just made me feel not quite sick, but definitely not good. And I think what that linked with was maybe the first kid on the way. And okay, I've got some skills. Does the world need another beer? Absolutely. There was no part of me that could look myself in the mirror and know that was a good thing. So then I started thinking, okay, what else might I do? How else might I use these skills? The brand that I was working on within Heineken and managing globally, we sort of had this platform around independence and freedom. So we started sort of doing something like this, actually, bringing in local heroes from around Amsterdam into the office just for lunchtime pizza yarns, to try and sort of win the internal fight within Heineken. That was also half the game, is to win in the market, you first had to play the game inside Heineken. I got pretty tired of that. Anyway, I sort of engineered a little bit. One of the people we brought in was Taco, who was the co-founder of VanMoof. I thought they were an awesome company. There was something in it that was this thing could be special. We had a coffee afterwards, and yeah, sort of once I had that offer, I'd been talking with them for a few months and having coffees and whatever, and then once I had that offer to go to Mexico, I said, look, it's sort of now or never. We either need to jump at this or not. And yeah, we both kind of, and then Tis, who was his brother, the other co-founder, flew over. We had there was no interview, there was no CV. It was let's have lunch and talk about.
True startup styles, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. And so, yeah, it sort of went from there.
You're awesome. VanMoof, VanMoof?
I say VanMoof.
VanMoof.
But then the Dutch would say VanMoof.
Okay, VanMoof. Okay. So
from Move. So it's all about movement.
I'll say
yeah.
VanMoof because I've got a bastardized Aussie
that's
accent.
fine.
Yeah. So VanMoof, like for people that don't know, I mean, you guys had a crazy story. Like Serge and I were talking about it before. You know, like some of the marketing campaigns, the way you were able to sort of digitize, you know, like a bike company so quickly and so well. Like, talk me through, how did that all happen? How did it blow up so fast?
It didn't blow up that fast in a way. It would have looked like that from the outside. So when I joined, the company would have been 5 years old and it wasn't growing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one electric bike that had sold about 13 units. There was no app. Was there an app? There was no app. You just sort of pushed the button and it turned on and told you how much battery it had. And the battery died pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But they had ideas. And they had ideas. And I honestly, at the start, I didn't believe in the electric thing. I was like, I don't think this thing's this is for, electric bikes are for my granddad. This is never going to be cool. But
were you riding a bike in Amsterdam at the time?
Everyone rides a bike. But even when I was working at VanMoof and we were like, what's the word, revolutionizing electric mobility, I didn't actually, and we could get our own staff bike, I didn't take an e-bike for like 4 years because I was like, I don't need one. And then I got one and I was like, oh my God, it's just so much fun and so easy. And, a city like Wellington where there's hills everywhere and bad weather and whatever, like it's just
You live up Brooklyn.
I live up Brooklyn. It's a complete no-brainer. So they were visionaries, and as all great founders are, they saw something that wasn't there that it could be, and they saw that, and they were global from day one in terms of the mindset. It was back in the early days of D2C and like digital native vertical brands, and they were like, we can do this end to end. Yeah, and I think the value I added, I'm not a visionary, and I was not the visionary. I came from a brand building background in corporates, and honestly, at the start, I was like, I felt so lost and so out of my depth because I was like, I just don't know what to do. I was the CMO, but I was also the first person in marketing. So I didn't know where to start. I had an intern, Tessa, who was amazing. And in the end, where I started was with coffee with the founders and kind of just asking them heaps of questions around, what their dream was for the company and where they wanted to take it. And through that, I kind of learnt, I guess, the ethos of the brand. And then we started to kind of build product and brand together. And I think that was part of the magic, is like the singularity of product. I told you about like Specialized and Trek, who have thousands of SKUs. We started off, I think, when I joined, we had maybe 20, and they were all what we called dumb bikes. So there was no tech, because we believed at the time that you needed a different bike for Germany, because they liked specs and gears and whatever, and the US wanted speed, so it had to be lighter. So we were making all these different bikes for different markets. And then one thing I did at the start was travel to our different key markets, which was like 3, Berlin, New York, Paris, Tokyo. And I just had pizza nights with a bunch of different riders and just brought them in, riders, non-riders, VanMoof lovers, VanMoof haters, and we just yarned over a few beers. And what I learned from that is they had all these preconceptions about a VanMoof bike. And then I said, okay, you haven't ridden the bike yet, hop on the bike, go around the block. And they all came around the block on the same bike in the 4 different places, and we're like, oh my God. So then we were like, okay, we don't need to make different bikes. We just need to
nail one bike,
nail one audience, nail one moment. So by the end, when we'd scaled whatever it was, heaps of X's, we effectively had one model, 2 colors, and then a few accessories. And every time we reduced the number of SKUs, every time we did less, it was terrifying, and we were like, oh my God, we've gone too far. And then every time it kind of worked, that focus, that singularity. Less colors, the Henry Ford thing, like less colors, less choice.
What's the relationship between that and the brand you built? Because you can understand less cost for having less products. You can understand in some ways it's easier to communicate because you don't have to talk about your 10,000 bikes giant or Specialized have. How did that relate to the brand you were building?
And so the brand took a while because the whole thing was making city cycling effortless, making it cool, which it was not at the start. We were building this cool brand for young people, but it was being sold to 48-year-old, real estate agents.
Apologies to real estate agents.
No,
Listen to the
nothing
podcast.
against real estate agents or 48-year-olds. But we really believed that this could, take off. So we built, the dream around the brand, and we built this dream around, and the Dutch. Have you guys been to Amsterdam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, no one's wearing a helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's wearing everyday clothes. You don't lock your bike. You just park it up, and that is so normal there, and it's a dream everywhere else in the world. And so we kind of built this dream around effortlessness, around cool, and around actually simplicity. Like the whole concept behind the VanMoof bike was strip out all the crap that you don't need and integrate everything else. And so that was another thing that evolved over years. Like at the start, there were still wires and cables, and the design team were like always like, how do we get, I didn't even notice them, but they were like, there's a wire, how we want to integrate that.
It's funny the parallels between tech and physical products and
Yeah.
things all the time, right? Well, I think what I'm curious to sort of double click on a little bit is like that's like the imposter syndrome that you have to sort of deal with when you go into a CMO role, right? And like you don't know the subject, you've come from FMCG brand, like beverages, because I think you were beverages even before Heineken, right? Like you were
Still beer, it was DB
Yeah.
breweries back
Yeah.
here in New Zealand, but yeah.
Yeah. And then so like talk me through that. How do you go about learning? How do you go about throwing yourself into that deep end?
Yeah. I still like suffer crippling imposter syndrome, and I'm at Goodnature I'm 4 years into the role, but I still every week have moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm terrible at this, I'm going to fail. How do you deal with it? I don't know. At VanMoof it was like there were some days at the start in that first year where I was just paralyzed and I was just waiting to be fired. It was just like they're going to find out, and I'm done for. No, like without a word of a lie.
And you couldn't even have a beer, right? Like
No,
it didn't-
I know, exactly. The only way out of it was just to move forward and just to like, right, I'm going to try something today, and I'm going to, just, I don't know, lean into it. And then I've since learned, at the time I thought this is me, I'm the problem. And then, of course, you move jobs and you think that's going to solve it. And then you're like, oh, I've still got this. And I've since learned that almost everyone, I chatted with this lady, Dame Bronwyn Holdsworth, a couple of years ago, who's like this amazing science researcher at this thing. And she's, seen and done everything. And we were talking with her daughter, and her daughter and I were talking about imposter syndrome and, whatever. And then she was like, do you guys think I don't get it? And we were like, yeah, no, you're a dame. She's like, every day I wake up, I'm scared. And, the more I've achieved, actually, the more scared I get. And I was like, oh, okay. So like maybe it's, you're not trying to actually beat these things. These are the things that actually drive us all forward.
I think you just acknowledge them. It's a comfort zone. I think you just rebrand it, right? It's like you do your best work when you're outside of your comfort zone, because that's when you're growing,
And that's it. And I think what ended up working well as we started growing at VanMoof was that experience I went through. As we started hiring people, I was like, how can I help them to find it less hard than I did? And so someone one day sent me this YouTube video of a lobster, and it's this rabbi talking about how lobsters grow. Do you know how lobsters grow?
No, tell me.
So it's like they're in there, they've got a shell, right?
Sure.
And at the start they're kind of chill and it's all good and it's all comfortable, and then as they grow inside their shell, and then it gets super, super uncomfortable. And then at a certain point they just can't tolerate it. And you kind of got two options at that point. You can either like take some drugs to numb the pain or just cower away, or you can keep going, and then at the point where it is at its most intolerable, the shell breaks open. You're like, oh my God, I got through that. This is amazing. Everything's good.
Just start all over again.
Then you go all over again. And so that became a bit of an analogy. We talked within VanMoof every day about, people would say I'm having a lobster moment, or it's okay, it's a lobster moment. And so we kind of normalized this struggle, and we celebrated it, because it's like we're doing something no one's done before. We're breaking new ground. We're disrupting an industry.
The alternative
Of course
is your
it hurts.
lobster's not growing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
been eaten, right?
That as well.
yeah, and it was funny after Heineken, and as VanMoof started like gathering ground, and then people it got to be a weekly thing where someone would reach out and say, can I have coffee with you? And I want to do this. I want to make this move from corporates to, and I'd say to them like, if you want to, great, but like think carefully about it. It's not that startups are awesome and corporates are bad. There's so many good things about corporates and the structure and the processes and all of that. Like, are you really willing to, risk it all? And like when I left Heineken, I had a 1-year contract at VanMoof. I was getting paid a whole lot less. It didn't make sense.
And you're exposed, right? Like you are
exposed.
It's almost like you're standing on a stage by yourself with no one, no processes, no systems, no corporate structure to hide behind.
And they I was feeling guilty because we were still not growing, and they had invested in me. Like I was their first person where they were like, we're going to spend more money than we have, and we want to. This person's going to do something, and because I was marketing, I was like, this person's going to help us sell more bikes. I was like, oh my god.
Well, obviously you did.
We got there in the end, yeah.
So, like, if you were, I guess, if you're looking back later in life, you're reading your own autobiography, right, and you're reading back through the VanMoof chapters. What are the things that you think you learned the most? Like, what are the things that define that time in your career?
I'm honestly still learning. So it went bankrupt like a couple of years after I left, and when we were back here, and I was at Goodnature. So I'm still learning. Yeah, when you asked about this podcast and I know we're going to work them off, I was like, oh no, because I'm still processing it.
Yeah.
What did I learn? There's so much. There's so many around culture and how you build teams, around the kind of people you want to hire and not hire, around so many mistakes with hiring, where you hire someone who you think's got all the creds and experience and they're going to be better than you and then they are not. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing I probably learnt was around that focus thing, like that you may want to do lots of things, but just do one thing. Like as a company, do one thing better than anyone else in the world, and have the courage to double down and triple down on that. On brand, at marketing, I learnt to be courageous. As we were growing, there were times when we were just making beautiful, lovely kind of bike porn, for lack of a better word. And it worked well in the ads, but it wasn't, at a certain point, we weren't standing for anything. Mm. And we'd always talk about we want to be positive and we want to be part of a movement, but then the very obvious enemy for VanMoof was cars in a city. And we always said cars are great for leaving the city, but in the city, they're terrible. They clog it up and we resisted it for 3 or 4 years, this idea of what if we could have a dig against cars. And then I don't know why, but at a certain point, I think we grew confidence. And at a certain point, we were like, this is the moment. And so we made what looked like a car ad, beautiful car in the city and, lines and whatever. And then ended up kind of, warping and realizing it went from being this dream car ad into smog and pollution and traffic jams and whatever. And then the car melted away into a bike, and that was that. And it was beautiful and it helped, but it didn't make any headlines or anything. It was just a kind of nice ad, a nice piece of content. And
what was the messaging to that ad though? Like what was the brand messaging, I guess, that you were trying to say?
The messaging was cities are better without cars and bikes are the future. There was our tagline linked to it was ride the future. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of be part of the change. And then something really unexpected happened. So we couldn't afford much, but in France we were like, we're going to put this on TV. And so we bought literally 2 spots on TV on the main channel or whatever on a Sunday night. And lo and behold, after the first spot, there was a complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority, blah, 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 and they pulled it. And we were like, what? Because it was stoking fires of discontent or something. There was some, kind of weird,
bureaucratic story.
Sort of. It was too negative, basically.
It's Renault.
Yeah,
Renault,
too negative for someone.
Provocative.
Yeah.
We dug into it. And by this time, it wasn't only me doing marketing at all. We had a PR team and we had actually a PR person in France. She did some digging into who was on the Advertising Standards Authority in France, blah, blah, and the head of the authority in France was part of Renault. No word of a lie. And so we wrote a press release, released it, talked to and this became a massive global story that this bike ad got banned in France.
Well, that's ridiculous! David and Goliath,
David and Goliath,
yeah.
and we chipped in there about the Renault thing. It was brilliant.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And that would never have come without bravery and kind of singularity of brand.
And why do you think you were less brave, 1, 2, 3 years earlier? And why do you think other, especially direct-to-consumer or mass-market brands, are just not brave? Given that's always the unlock, is the risk you took.
Yeah, it's confidence, I reckon, and it probably stemmed from my own confidence, linked to the imposter syndrome and all that around what if we turn people off, and what if we, and of course, the audience we were selling to, they also drove cars, so it's like, are we just going to offend people? Yeah, it was all of that, and I guess because we were growing anyway, we didn't have to do it, So actually, what the unlock was, doing a bit more work into our brand and going, what do we stand for? What do we truly stand for? And then it's like, okay, well, if we stand for that, then we have to do this. And then why don't other D2C brands do it? I think D2C brands, I don't follow it enough now because it's that whole landscape's changed, but it started becoming this cookie cutter approach, and it started becoming just quite vanilla, like take a category, shoes, beautiful photography, this and that, show the lovely lifestyle thing. I think anything over time, maybe you start off a bit cutting edge and then it sort of gets, the edges cut off. Whereas we went the other way actually, like start off with no money, the brand was the product. And then as we started to grow, it was like, okay, let's have a crack. If you're disrupting an industry, let's actually stand up.
Yeah, awesome. That led you back here, right? So obviously you decided to ultimately come back to Wellington.
Yeah, well, we went there for a year to Amsterdam when my now wife and I were 26 without jobs and backpacks. And it was like, we'll try and find jobs, but we'll see you back in a year, family. And then there were these year extensions the whole way through. Then we got pregnant and it was like, okay, now's the moment where we should move home. But we don't want to.
Amsterdam's great though. I love Amsterdam.
And we our boys had their first 5 years there, and Rufus, the oldest, learned to speak Dutch there and went to Dutch school. But it was kind of at that moment when they were becoming 5, and then that's the moment when you don't see kids older than that in the city because they move out to where you can get more space. And we'd had 10 years of every Dutch person going like, why? You're from New Zealand and your wife's from New Zealand. Why are you here? You've got the nature, and so, we felt maybe a bit guilty for being, keeping our kids away from their family, grandparents and blah, blah. And I don't know, we did start to miss home.
Yeah.
So that was 4 years into VanMoof, and
And you were chief of staff by that stage?
No, I was CMO.
CMO, yeah.
Yeah. Effectively resigned, but had no plan with moving back home. It was like, this just feels right. We're gonna take a crack here, as we did sort of moving over there. We'll find our way. Moved home, and then we agreed I'll stay on for a few months and just kind of consult. And we had a big launch in March 2020. Got home December 24, 2019. Happy days, all good. And then this COVID thing.
Yeah,
We've heard of it. Yep.
Heard of it, yeah. And so
it's like as soon as someone says March 2020, I just chill. It's like that, yeah.
And I because I'm probably not a visionary, I didn't quite see how it was going to evolve. Even so, the week that the lockdowns here started, I was due to fly over to Amsterdam for this big launch that we have, and my farewell was going to be at the end of that. It's like, do the launch, have fun with the team again, and then done. And I was still convinced I was flying at the start of it. And a friend of my wife was like, do you not see where this is going? I was like, no, I think it's going to be fine. And of course, by the end of that, the whole world was shut down. And so, yeah, that kind of changed everything as well, because then the launch, which was supposed to be, an offline launch, we had launch events planned in Paris and Milan and wherever else, New York, I think. All of a sudden, we had 3 weeks to pivot this launch to be an online launch. And for us, a launch was not like a 5% part of the business, new product. Like when we launched a new bike, it was effectively the old the old company gets discontinued. The new one, here's the next step. So it was equal parts exciting and terrifying. Funnily enough, we worked with a New Zealand company, a Wellington company, who made like websites and digital experiences.
Resin?
resin.
Yeah, I remember. I used to recruit for resin. I remember when they were doing that project.
So they were the ones, they pulled off this brief in 3 weeks.
Because they have an office, they have a studio over in Amsterdam. As well. Yeah.
And that wasn't even me that did that. That was my team who, like, I don't know how they found resin, but and so resin built the whole, we learned from Apple and all that. And we were like, okay, well, if we can't do this in person, let's actually make this into an event, this launch, and let's build hype around it. And so resin built the whole platform to host tens of thousands of people around the world at the same moment, and we were all in different places and different rooms, and yeah,
awesome. Out of interest, so VanMoof, they went into receivership.
Yeah,
are they trading still, or?
Yeah, so this is the funny thing with life, is sometimes things get a rebirth. So they went into receivership, which was gutting, but there were a lot of bidders there because the bones of the business were still awesome. It's a super strong brand.
Is it mostly anchored on the brand, or is it something else?
I think brand and singularity with product. I think those two things, and the desire that creates amongst people. So funnily enough, McLaren, which was founded way back in the day by a Kiwi racing driver, Bruce McLaren, one of their arms, bought VanMoof out of receivership and has kind of given it a restart in Amsterdam. A bunch of people that I used to work with are part of that. And they're kind of, they're up and away again, selling bikes. And I hope, and I'm sure, learning, taking everything that was great and then improving a few things, and away you go.
Awesome. That's so great to see. So for a guy that says he gets imposter syndrome, you then thought, all right, well, CMO is not good enough. I'm going to be a CEO now and jump into a completely different vertical again. Yeah. And so you came back here and then.
So we were already back. So I was still contracting back to VanMoof. I was working, we were in O'Fero Bay. I was joining calls with people around the world at stupid hours of the day and night. And missing people because I like people. In the meantime, actually through Serge. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that.
So we were part of me coming home. I was like, I don't know what I want to do, and I want to scope it out. I love hardware combined with tech. I love companies. The part of the VanMoof journey I enjoyed the most was like 50 to 250 people. I love working with founders, and I love a product that does good. So I was like, there must be heaps of companies in Wellington like that. I'll just find them. And then I was part of the NZT beachheads thing when I came home. So that's advisors who dip in and help for a few hours to give advice to companies. And it was COVID happened, so the whole move was towards digital. So I was a digital advisor on, how you might be able to tap into this whole thing. Serge was doing the same thing. We had a coffee in Brooklyn, and then a few months later, Goodnature was looking for a director on the board with kind of global brand marketing scaling experience, and Serge was like, would you be open to it? Again, had a coffee with the founders and joined the board. Loved going to board meetings, going to the office, seeing the team. I was probably quite an engaged director in that way because I was just so stoked to be around people.
Do you want to tell people what Goodnature does?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. So Goodnature, VanMoof was about disrupting the bike industry and making biking cool and infusing tech into bikes. Goodnature is doing the same thing with pest control. So we make smart, humane, self-resetting, in particular rat and mouse traps that have a tech component as well. So they're connected products, which means that if you're using it, when you've had a kill, and you can collect all your kill data, and you can measure your success over time. It'll also tell you when you need to change the power supply or the anything about the trap. And then as a company, it means that we're able to look at that data on a global level. So we can, know when there's going to be a rat plague in Sydney before anyone else does, because we can see it from these kind of nodes that we have around the world. So I felt stoked actually to find what I think is the coolest, little company in Wellington, making super innovative products and sending them all around the world. And so, it was board for 18 months. And then through that journey, the company's not new, so it's 20 years old next week. So back then, how old was it? 15 or 14 years old. And they'd never had a CEO or a kind of a single point.
It was the two founders, isn't it?
2, 3, yeah. The two that started it, and then one other came on board after a while. And so, yeah, we ran a process. I put my name in the hat. Obviously, I wasn't part of running the process when my name was in the hat. Got the job. So, yeah, you're right, actually. It was like, there was part of me in my head the whole time going, what are you doing? Like, I just spent 5 or 6 years moving towards some level of comfort at VanMoof, even though it was growing. And then it's like, why are you, but I also wanted to. I wanted
Well, you
a
obviously
challenge.
had a year and a half of like understanding the subject matter a little bit,
Yeah,
I guess.
and I was like, this company's awesome.
Yeah.
And I didn't think there were any industries left, because when we did the bike industry, it was actually quite archaic, especially within city bikes. So it was so ripe for disruption. But then 5 years later, I was like, everyone's done D2C. It's all been done. There, shoes have been done, and cars have been done, and printers have been done, and like luggage has been done. There's not an industry left to disrupt. And then pest control was like, oh my God, it's so archaic. New Zealand has such a, I think, an amazing approach to pest control and mindset amongst the people. So there was a real reason for why this thing can come from New Zealand. And yeah, so I wanted to do it. I was like, let's go for it.
Yeah, I remember meeting the guys years ago, and I think, was it Newtown? They used to be in Newtown,
We're
walking
still
around.
are.
Still there, and the office, and then the factory on the right, and walking around. It was just like all these different little components and things and people, and I was like, man, I can't believe there's these companies that you just like in Wellington, like selling this stuff globally with all these cool things.
And you don't hear about them because if they're globally focused. Wellington's not their market, so it's like, why would we talk about ourselves?
Yeah.
We've moved from that building. We were in that building until last year. I kind of call it the student flat because it was pretty grimy, grungy, but it had some charm maybe.
Yeah.
And then now we're still in Newtown, but on Adelaide Road, so just down the road from the basin, and bigger premises, super modern, fit for purpose. Factory footprint twice the size, and it's
so
just
what's
amazing.
the scope of like Goodnature? Like, what's the obviously selling a global product?
Yeah.
Like, how many products are you selling?
Yeah, so on a good year, we sell over 100,000 traps, and they're high value traps. So our A24 smart trap kit with the tech is about $200, and then we sell the consumables that power it. So there's like a paste product that you put in, and there's the gas bottle that powers the trap.
Yeah.
And in a good year we sell about 500,000 of those, and 85% export.
And there's only 2 versions now with the 2 colours.
Sort of. It's pretty close to that simple.
Yeah.
That we kind of screwed with that last year. So we had there's the A24, which is the rat, mouse, and stoat trap. That was the original.
Yeah.
And it started off solving a New Zealand conservation problem. So it was only one, for sure. It was one product. And then, that went really well, and the product worked, and it grew and whatever. And then at a certain point, through push and pull, I think the founders, Robbie and Craig, sort of realized this thing that kills, rats and mice, they're all around the world. This has many more applications. And at the same time, kind of people reached out from the US, from Europe. And so we sort of started trying things and some proactive outreach ourselves. And we're like, okay, cool, this could be a lot bigger. And conservation as a channel is awesome because the people are awesome. And what you learn deploying traps at scale is amazing. And you can really make massive product leaps. But it's a really fickle channel as well. And especially in the last few years, the funding's only been going one way.
Yeah.
And so opening up those new markets, new channels was really key.
Well, talk me through the difference between like selling a product globally, a hardware product globally from Amsterdam and then from Wellington. Is there any differences that you can see being on the other side of the world?
I mean, already what we're doing at VanMoof was pretty crazy in terms of, trying to disrupt this global industry. But Amsterdam's a much more logical place to do it. And, within Europe, you can get so much penetration within a few hundred kilometers. Yeah, it's even more crazy what we're doing from Goodnature. Like, we make every single one of those traps 100 meters from the basin reserve.
Which, for those of you who are not familiar, it's sort of New Zealand's home of cricket, which is not something
We could do a whole
we talk
podcast
about.
on what cricket is. but
Yeah,
it's-
well, we're not talking about cricket here.
As
the point
an Aussie, we do.
the point is we make all these traps effectively in the centre of New Zealand's capital city, and then send them, some of them around the country, but most of them around the world. Which, popular belief a few years ago would have said, okay, you stop doing that, you outsource to, probably China, somewhere in Asia, bring your costs down, etc., etc. What we've sort of realised over time is that singularity of what we do, that we have all functions in the same office, from sales to customer support to marketing to finance to production, manufacturing, quality control. That's a superpower, and we know this thing, like pneumatic traps that can reset themselves and kill animals humanely. We know it better than anyone else in the world. And so being able to do that in a really hands-on way, in a high-value way, is valued. And I think the New Zealand brand, is part of that as well. It stands for quality. It stands for trust and credibility.
And conservation, right?
Conservation.
Yeah.
How does that superpower manifest itself? So it's all well and good, everyone's in the same office. It presumably makes for more efficient communication, better relationships. But how does that manifest in a way that's useful or helpful to customers and to shareholders?
Yeah, I think it's actually, it's about collisions, as in bumping into people in different ways in the office. And it's about tension. Like if we had, sales teams all around the world and whatever, and you got in-market people, and then I've seen it a few times, you have this kind of head office versus, the opcos or the markets or whatever you call them, and there's dynamics and whatever, and it's just not always healthy. Whereas in our office, it's not to say that there's heaps of tension, but we're able to have those debates kind of together. You've got salespeople who are fighting for, opportunities that we're missing in market, or product issues that are showing up, or it has real downsides. Like, our commercial team, they're on calls most nights with our partners in the US and, in Europe and wherever. But I think the upsides massively outweigh the downsides in terms of also, especially when things go wrong. Like if there's a problem in customer support, like we'll hear Matthew talking on the phone. You'll literally hear it in the afternoon going, oh, there's something up here. We have a thing around all stops in production where if anyone on the floor feels like something's not right, noticeable quality or even a feeling, they can call an all stop. People gather around and you get around the problem. There's a buzzer that goes off when every trap comes off the line after, I think it's 37 seconds. We who work upstairs hear the buzzer going off. You notice that the buzzer's not going off. Then you're like, why, what's happened? So I don't know, it's like crazy real-time feedback.
How do you scale that? Like, because that's the same thing in startups, like in our world, Serge, like almost like when you've got your original core SaaS team around the table and you just feel it, like everyone's kind of working from that kitchen table and then it gets to 2 rooms, and you lose a little bit of that thing and then it gets to, offices and you lose your culture or your culture ultimately changes. Yeah. And so like in your experience of someone that's worked in some of these bigger, larger corporate brands, you know, and smaller brands now, what do you think people can do to scale that?
Yeah, small is easier, and I feel so lucky for what we have at Goodnature. There's 40 of us. It's a beautiful size. We all work together. Most of the office were dressed up for Halloween today, and you have a laugh. And VanMoof, when I joined, was 20. We literally it was 3 long picnic tables, and we had all functions there. Yeah, I think especially once you get beyond 100, it really changes. And I learned all of this for the first time at VanMoof. Like you kind of went through these growth edges, and I think it's about intentionality. Like you go from not needing to say what the culture is because everyone just knows, to we might need some values here. We might need to be a lot more explicit. We might need to get inductions right, and celebrate the behaviours we want, call out the behaviours we don't like, etc. But I don't know, and so much of it's around hiring, like good hiring. Yeah. Hey,
I live in Aro Valley, and so I'll often walk from my place, which is down near the park up towards, Arrow Bake to get a coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And I walked with my girlfriend and she spotted this sign once on the side of the street that had a little bit of perfume in it, like for Abel perfume. And she was, oh, let's try that. And then she was like, actually, I think I've heard this lady talk at an event before. And then I was like, oh, interesting. And so we were chatting about that. And then when I was looking into your background, it turns out that I was like, oh, he's the director. And they come, oh my God, it's his wife. And so you're like, your whole family's in this sort of, ecosystem of innovation and startups. And I'm curious to hear about Abel. How did Abel come about? Was that something she brought back from Netherlands or?
Yeah, so Abel is, if VanMoof was disrupting bikes and Goodnature is disrupting pest control, Abel, Dutch again, is disrupting perfume, which also was another industry super ripe for disruption, where, cloaks and mirrors around ingredients, etc., etc. So Fran started that in Amsterdam. We'd been there a couple of years. She was a winemaker. She trained as a winemaker, had worked for New Zealand wine growers here and Villa Maria and whatnot. We went to the Netherlands where there's no wine industry. She joined a tech company, which she didn't really enjoy. And she was always going to start something. She never liked her bosses and always had ideas. So it was only a matter of time. And at the time was, sort of looking for a natural perfume. Couldn't find one. And that classic Kiwi mindset, I think, of, okay, well, I wonder if I can make that. But she was really clear that she didn't want it to be this kind of, fuddy farmer's market stand thing. She wanted it to be beautiful, premium, world-class. So perfumers are called noses. There's, I think she'll probably tell me I'm wrong, but I think there's less noses in the world than astronauts. So they're a really rare breed. And as far as I know, there's only one nose from Australasia, and he's a guy called Isaac Sinclair, who's a Kiwi, who you could do a whole podcast on him. He heard a perfumer come and talk when he was at high school as a 17-year-old, went up and yarned with him afterwards, and that perfumer said, if you come over to Europe, I'll, love to catch up and whatever. And
I assume it's a biological, genetic thing to have an incredible nose.
Yeah, but it's also you train.
Right.
You can be a bit gifted, but then you train. And so, Isaac bought a one-way ticket after finishing high school, rocked up on this guy's doorstep. This guy worked for one of the biggest perfume houses in the world. Isaac's still there 25 years later,
Wow.
And so Fran heard him talking in a podcast or a YouTube something about how perfume should be more like wine and embrace the seasons and embrace imperfections. And she was like, that's our guy. He was is a classic creative in terms of he was impossible to get hold of. She reached out and didn't hear back for months, and then eventually we had this call with him in Sao Paulo, and we still work with him 12 years later. So that's become a really key part of the company and the brand, is this collaboration between Fran, who has a great nose and a real strong, eye for creative direction, let's say, but knows she is aware she's not a perfumer and doesn't want to play that role. But then the interplay she has with Isaac, and it's this dance that they do, and always thinking of new concepts and developing new fragrances. And so she started that. We sort of sometimes jokingly call it our first child, a year before we had Rufus, and she was pretty clear on that if we had kids first, she might never start it, because there'd always be a reason not to. And so it was let's do this and jump all in. And that's Fran. She is a visionary and super courageous, and jump in and work it out along the way. I'm a different person and profile. I would never start a company. The reason I like 50 to 250 is I like there being something formed, some interesting idea, but then some problems too, and some chaos, and how can we work together and shape this?
So I'm just interested in how you're perceiving the difference between someone who starts something and someone who grows something. So we had Nemo here on the podcast a few weeks ago, the notion of pioneers versus settlers, right? Pioneers are the first there, settlers kind of grow the thing. What are the attributes that are just fundamentally different? Again, you're going to sort of in an incredible position at the dinner table. One of you is a pioneer, one of you is a settler.
Yeah. I think Well, one thing is like appetite for change. So Fran loves change, and she's super comfortable throwing herself in the deep end, backing herself to swim. That kind of courage. Whereas I naturally resist change. Even moving to Amsterdam in the first place, we wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for her. She was like, I'm going, come if you like, I'd love you to come. But I was terrified. I was like, what if I don't get a job? What if all the reasons this can go wrong? Whereas she was just like, we'll find our way. And if we don't, we'll come home. And I think that attribute made her awesome for starting a business, because it's like, if you think rationally about the chances of getting a business right, you're just not going to do it, Whereas you have to be irrational. I think at Movac you guys work with Alia, eh?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So she talks about founders as being intolerables, which of course could sound harsh, but I love it in terms of they just don't accept things, as per normal, and they're happy to go the extra mile. Whereas
Ali's the mental toughness.
Yeah, exactly.
consultant.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal. Hey,
Yeah.
she's phenomenal.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
She's changed. She's helped me so much this year, actually, with imposter syndrome and all those things. But I think there's value in both, and I think that's when a company can really go to the next level. Is you need that founder energy to start it. I don't think you can get there without that. But then if you've got settlers who don't want to be that and don't want to be in the spotlight, don't need to feel like it's their thing or their strategy even, but who can kind of work with that person to distill out the magic. That's when it gets interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge that we face, right? Is like founders or pioneers often want to be settlers, and don't realize
How intolerable they are.
exactly,
Yeah.
and how much faster they could go if they got the fuck out of the way,
Yeah.
And I think, and as a settler, sometimes we think we want to start a business and we want to be a pioneer, and we want to go off and be entrepreneurial, but then they'll try, and
Yeah.
then they just don't have that courageousness or the stupidity sometimes,
Yeah.
the ignorance to dive into something.
Yeah,
And
I've seen it the other way as well, where a founder maybe has imposter syndrome or something, and is like, now it's time for me to step away and leave it to the settlers, and that doesn't work either, because you lose that
Tension.
bravery. You need some
Spark,
spark, chaos, all those things. You need that energy.
How do you retain that at Goodnature now? You've got founders who are no longer in leadership roles per se.
Yeah.
And you're now there, and you recognize that some level of chaos is necessary for the magic. How do you sustain that?
Yeah, that's through people, eh? Like, so Goodnature, 20 years old. We have awesome people who have that spark, and I think we have a nice balance of pioneers and settlers, but equally we're not the new kid on the block. We're 20, and the stage we're in right now is about good, strong, organic growth, profitability, new ideas, but in a really thoughtful way. When I joined, we were working on 5 or 6 different traps at the same time. Big team, we were trying to do too much. And I think now it's a much smaller team. We're doing one project at a time that we think about very carefully from all angles. So that's the settlers going, what makes the most sense? But then you've still got pioneers making the product who are like pushing every single boundary possible. And that works.
Awesome. Hey, I'm interested to hear, like, as someone that's transitioned industries and titles and like exec roles, like if you look back, like if you go into the CEO role right now at Goodnature, what's the thing that you nailed the best, and what's the thing that you really struggled with?
I'll answer the struggled with first, and then I'll think about the second one. Struggled with was I felt like I needed to work it all out myself, and I felt like I needed to have the answers actually. And so when I was struggling in those first couple of years, I didn't ask for help. I didn't reach out. When people offered me chances to go on leadership courses or whatever, I was like, no, the business can't afford that, and I shouldn't need that. I should be able to do this. And then I just reached a point where I was like, this is not good for me or the company. And so started to talk with others and My mantra is sort of a coffee a week, like trying to have a coffee a week with someone who either I can help or they can help me, and inevitably you help each other. And then the more people I talk to, the more I realise that there's nothing special or unique about my struggles. Everyone has them, and most of the time I feel like their problems are bigger or harder than mine. So that was the biggest mistake in terms of thinking I had to do it myself because I was the CEO. Whereas, at Goodnature, my team is awesome, and they're all better at what they do than I am, which is exactly the way it should be. That's probably what I got right, actually, and it took a while. So we've had different iterations of our management team. We're a pretty tight team of 4, and everyone knows what they're responsible for. They're all pretty autonomous, super clever, capable, but also really good EQ and ability to have tough, brave, honest conversations.
Is that good recruitment, good leadership, chemistry, luck?
Yeah, learning from mistakes, evolving, iterating, actually. I think at one point we had a management team of 7, including me, and now we're 4. Sometimes someone leaves and then you're like, do we just replace that person directly? Or, Hannah, who's our COO, she came in as CFO with a finance background, but has real aptitude for structure, processes, still with creativity in there. So that was a logical one to kind of piece together once, our operations lead left. Adam, who heads up commercial, which now includes marketing. It used to exclude marketing. I don't know. So it's sort of learning along the way, but then it's also going, what's the team that's going to get us to, we don't just want to tick along with this thing. We think this thing can really, I find it sad when Kiwi companies that could go all the way sell themselves short. And I think at Goodnature, we see that this thing could become really big and could make a real dent, meaningful dent in a good way. My team, we share the same vision. And I think that's on tough days when you have fights or when you disagree or whatever, that part never wavers. And so we find our way back.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that's the most amazing thing about small teams, right? Is that you can see the energy just being charged between people, like a little bit of electricity.
Yeah.
I've been quietly watching you guys for a long time since I think the founders brought me in once to talk about an international sales role or something, and and I remember just like thinking, oh, this is cool, this is really cool,
and it's obscure, like I never thought I would work for a company selling traps. My kids still tell their friends that I'm an exterminator and all that kind of thing. So it took me a while to get my head around it, because I don't know, something about you says bikes are cool and beer is cool, but trapping, that's a bit, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
And I thought that, when I was working at VanMoof, everyone wanted to talk at barbecues about bikes and whatever. I thought, pest control, that'll be fine. But in New Zealand, you go to a bar and everyone's a trapper. Yeah. And so you get holed up in the corner, which is awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, well, that's sort of gets us to the end of the podcast, and we normally always finish off with some rapid fire questions. And so I've got a few here, if you don't mind staying around and asking a few of these, answering a few. So what was your biggest learning from the Dutch working style?
Directness. Kiwis, we talk around everything, and it wastes time.
So you like directness?
Yeah, I love it.
I love it too, and I think I'm an Aussie, I think I just never have to worry about what someone's thinking. If they tell me straight to my face, I love it.
And the Dutch, at the start, it felt brutal because they, you're like, you're really offending me here, but they're not. They're just being honest.
Yeah.
It means that meetings, you don't really talk about the weather up front and this and this and that. They kind of get straight in because they really value life as well. So then they go home and off to their families, but when you're there, you knock it out. Yeah. So, being direct is good. It meant that it was a little bit hard for us coming home because then we came back with this directness, and
not everyone likes it.
Not everyone likes it. Yeah.
Yeah. I struggled when I first moved to New Zealand because people always thought that I was attacking them, and I was like, no, I'm just saying what's on my mind. Like I'm thinking something, so I'm telling you. And
honesty is just it's the only way.
So I think I'll know the answer to this then. What's learning? A written memo or live debate?
Live debate. Yeah. There's a place for memos, but the magic is in people and getting in a room together, and
What's your take on the remote versus hybrid versus in-office situation?
I love in office. I think it should either be in office or remote almost. I think it's hybrid is really hard. And I have empathy for companies where it has to be like Fran's business, Abel, half the team are in New Zealand, half of them are spread around the world. So they have to be hybrid. But wherever you can bring teams together and wherever you can have those clashes and collisions, that's where the magic is.
Yeah. What's the first non-technical hire on a team that you think is important? When I say non-technical,
Non-product,
non-engineering or product,
If you can afford it, I think brand. I think someone who can really take the product and help to shape it and help to focus, because I think if brand and product can become the same thing as you grow, that they sort of infuse together, that's awesome. So it's often a big cost, but if you can bring that person in early, then that's great.
How do you describe brand to people, especially people who are not from a marketing background? So you're trying to explain it to your
so it's
team.
not Instagram ads.
Good to know.
It's someone who can distill down what you stand for, like what your values are as a company, what your principles are, kind of the impact you want to make on the world, and what your voice actually.
Everyone always tells me it's like what your customers say about you when you're not in the room, and as a recruiter, that scares the shit out of me.
Interesting.
What's like working with founders? Like you've worked with like unique founders, right? And so like I'm curious on your take on this. But what's a common founder myth that you would bust?
Well, they're not all intolerable, and I don't think you have to be intolerable to be a great founder. And just I don't know. I often hear people talk about founders, as they're amazing, but they bring all these problems. The myth I would bust is like the world is nothing without founders. Like we wouldn't have all these great things without someone who had the courage to, against all odds, start something.
Yeah, awesome.
Great one.
And what's a lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
The imposter syndrome thing, probably, and bad hires, like hiring for seniority. Hiring based on someone's CV.
Yeah. And you're talking about like, so if we're Startup Theatre podcast, if we're, oh my God, someone from Joe Rogan's or Diary of a CEO or someone, because they worked at this company, they're going to be good? Is that what you're talking?
They've worked at that company, even though they might have been one of 1,000 people, they've worked there. So they're what we need. And we're crap, and they're going to come in and make us good.
How do you distill through that?
Yeah, because some of those people are awesome.
Exactly.
I think like, to me, mindset trumps everything. Like, does this person have a learning mindset? Are they curious? If they think they know the answers, just don't hire them. But if they've got great questions and energy and they're willing to take a risk, then I like shared risk. I think that's probably why it worked with me at VanMoof as well, because we were both taking equally big risks. And then it's like, well, even if you fail, at least you did that together. Yeah.
I think there's that buy-in, right? Like that everyone's buying in, and like blood pack brothers, from the start.
But if you see someone from Joe Rogan and you shell out whatever it would cost to hire that person, there's an imbalance in risk from the start. And, you're going to be wanting results from day one.
But I always tell people, because I'm obviously in recruiting, right? So I talk about this very topic all the time, and I'm like, all right, well, what you're buying from that person right now is what they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You're not buying their recent relevant experience. Their recent relevant experience is managing 100 people that did the job that, you're looking for 10 years ago. And so you kind of either like hire the person that's on their way up there, or hire the person that hates the bigger company now. They've done the 250 to 500 and realize they want to go back and do it again. And so they're the tests that you should be asking for.
Yeah. And you've got to take the name out. Like we hired people because they were, in hindsight, because they were from Apple or this or that. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, is this person right for your company, your brand, etc.?
Yeah, I like the group. I like the joint, curiosity thing and the joint risk thing. I think that's a good thing. Hey man, this has been a really awesome chat. Like really enjoyed chatting with you. It's it's great how many synergies. Like it's businesses and growing and scaling businesses, we're all kind of just doing the same things, right? We're all trying to figure out what the hell we're doing. We're all trying to pretend that we know what we're doing until we realize that you can have the confidence to know that it's okay to not know what you're doing. And so I think it's awesome. Abel, for folks that want to check out Abel, how would they find your wife's business?
abelfragrance.com, so ABEL fragrance.com.
Awesome. We'll drop that down in the show notes. Sweet. And then obviously Goodnature for folks, we'll pop that down. It's goodnature.co.nz.
That's the one.
Down into the show notes as well. But yeah, man, hey, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries. Thanks, Troy.
Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Well, Serge, I'm going to be really honest here. You called for Dave to come on the podcast and did not disappoint. That was a really awesome conversation. What a cool guy.
Yeah, he's just a great human, curious. I think he's just really balanced. He's quite a different personality to many of the other, especially tech founders that we get on here. He's obviously got that international exposure. And
it's interesting hearing about like different lenses that he looks through now, from like being, marketing and brand to now CEO and the likes. And so...
Yeah, exactly. He's had that. And then, of course, being a director and, no doubt everyday advisor to his wife and Abel, and maybe we'll have Francis on at some point as well. So, those different lenses really came through today, and I'm glad we had Dave on.
It's so interesting with Abel because I walk past there every day. I live in RO Valley and I walk down the street usually every day and go get a coffee from RO Bake, and they have a little sign out the front, like a little silver sign with a little perfume sampler, and I've always wondered what that is. And who would have thought that I would learn it on our podcast?
Great story.
Yeah, awesome. So you YouTubers out there that have been watching us, thank you so much for getting this far on the podcast. This is the time right now where, Serge, we're going to put some things up on the screen. So why don't we cut to Serge? He's going to show you exactly where you could push to subscribe.
So you push down there and you'll see a word starting with S saying subscribe, and that's what you have to do. And then on the other side with his other hand, if you click down onto that side there, you're going to see another video that you can watch from this Startup Theatre podcast like world that we've created. And so keep watching, keep giving us all the likes and subscribes. And so hit subscribe, watch as many videos as you can, watch for as long as you can, because this is how we grow the podcast channel. Our sponsors and our backers look at all these numbers to see if we're growing this podcast, to see if so many people are watching and subscribed, because the more people that are subscribed, the better these podcasts get. So thank you so much. I'm Troy Hammond. I'm Serge Van Dam. Thanks for watching.